Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera. This episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Rhythm. Rhythm is the #1 AI betting tool in the market, and guess what? It can actually help you make your NCAA bracket. Sign up with the free link in the bio down below, get a week for free, and it can help you create a bracket based on their modeling systems. And we beat, or Rhythm beat, I beat because I was using Rhythm. You can beat the market. Last year, they beat the market by over 30% on average with Rhythm created, Rhythm AI generated brackets. And that can help you. Maybe you win your office pool for the first time this year. Credit to Rhythm, because a lot of you guys, like me, have not watched a ton of college ball this year. So let them do the work for you. I know filling out a bracket's fun, but a lot of times we tend to overthink it just a bit. And this is going to make your life a lot easier, especially when you're going to be in a million pools, because that's just kind of the way it goes. So be sure to get that with the link in the bio right below. I want to talk about a couple things before I dive into the Wednesday NBA slate. The first thing that I wanted to touch on was, obviously we have the NCAA tournament and we have Major League Baseball starting with the series. Are they in Tokyo? The Japan series. Japan is crazy. So we've got a good opportunity here for a couple different things. Well, I talk about it a little bit, but account health is really, really important. And the reason I say that it's important is it allows you to get down on certain props. It allows you to maintain accounts. It allows you to kind of keep some promos, keep some things coming into your account that you normally wouldn't get. A lot of times you're trying to disguise your action. I'm not saying that you're all experts. Like, not everybody that listens to this podcast is an expert, right? But a lot of the times, even if you're not, if you're paying for a service, whether it's mine in the huddle, which you can get for get a trial in the bio down below, test this out. It's a lot of fun. We are going to be doing a bracket challenge as well, so be on the lookout for that. Whether you're following us or you're following like another service, whatever, right? One of the things that you guys aren't always seeing, because it's not really conducive to put out there, right? There's always a lot of back end things in terms of priming an account and keeping an account healthy. And I'm not saying like you need to be a complete degenerate, because it's not what it is. But there's certain times of the year and there's certain opportunities, certain events that you can kind of take advantage of to make your action look a little bit more recreational, or so to speak. And the reason I say that is, a lot of times that the part of the problem with sometimes with the service is, a lot of times you're getting a line, and due to the action, due to the volume of bets that are associated with that, it's moving the line. It could be your service, it could be the service that you're using, it could be another one, it could whatever. But sometimes people are on the same play. That's going to happen. It's almost inevitable, right? The lines move, it triggers different things on the back end for your account, and that can create a situation where you're limited. They can create a situation where you're not getting promos, what have you. So I know, like, just the other day there was a thing with ESPN Bet where essentially there was a promo that, like, people were getting deposit matches that like really weren't supposed to get deposit matches, right? I don't have ESPN promos, so I can test it out anyway. But like, I wish I could have. My ESPN account is just cooked. The reason I'm kind of saying this though is, like, if you can you try to keep as many accounts as you can where you're getting all the promos, you're getting all the deposit things, like whatever. It's better for you, it's better for your activity, it's better for your opportunities to make money. Some of the ways there are a couple ways you can do that. Two of them are about to start, or are starting like right now. With baseball, throw in a couple home run parlays. Bet on your local team. Bet on, like, put some like home run bets in. Put some like little like RBI parlays in. Do some SGPs for baseball that are like centered around the start of baseball, whether it's these games between the Cubs and the Dodgers, or like for me, I'm in New Jersey, but you could hit like the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies, whatever. Do some like Aaron Judge home run, the Ohtani Judge home run combo, like Judge Soto, whatever. And it kind of helps mask your action because it's popping. They're like, oh, this guy's just throwing in parlays, like whatever. Also, for college basketball, it's NCAA season. I have not bet on an NCAA game yet this year. I'm gonna wind up doing it for the tournament. Some of it'll probably be live betting or something like that. But like, if I'm watching a game and I'll convince myself about, that's pretty good. that's a pretty good spot. Like I'm gonna jump in here. So there's always gonna be some opportunities there. Plus, there's just more offerings a lot of times during the tournament. You're getting some more niche props, some more players, whatever, some more markets, and that can be advantageous as well. The reason I'm saying this though is these are times where people that don't pick up their phone to bet the entire year will pick up their phone to bet. It'll be like the start of baseball season, the NCAA tournament, the NBA playoffs in about a month. Granted, we're all betting NBA, so it's not as big of a deal for us. But if you're not an NBA bettor and you're listening to the show, then great, right? So I think it's super, super important to try to keep your accounts healthy. And the reason it's important is it gives you more outs. So it lets you bet on the best lines at all times. You can bet on, like if there's a great line on Bet365 or there's a great line on DraftKings, then you can get down on them because your accounts are primed in the right way. And the reason I'm saying this, where I'm saying like, well, we're not always peeling back that onion in some of the services that are out there, is because it's not really conducive. Like you're trying to disguise your action, you're trying to make it look recreational to a degree. And I'm not necessarily I'm not trying to lose the bets sometimes, but sometimes you are throwing things in where you're just like, like this has a chance, or this is like fun, or like I'm watching this game with my friends, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that, like I want to have a little action on it, right? And the thought process behind it is, yeah, maybe it's like a little bit like minus EV, or so to speak, but in terms of that individual bet, but overall for your account, for your profile, whatever, it is going to have an expected positive return for you because you're gonna be able to keep some accounts open. And like if you come on and the only time you ever come on and bet and you're going on your apps and you're betting like some random role player unders or overs, like, but they're just players that just don't really pop. You're like the only person steaming a shitload of action on a random player that they probably didn't even post till like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. That's going to flag your account. It's 100% going to flag your account. I don't care what anybody says. And you're trying to you just can't do that all the time. And I think that's one of the things too that I think is super important with, like, some people say you need to be able to beat some of like the bigger markets, right? Like sides, total spreads, whatever. I think that you can. I think that's important. But I also think that betting player props, especially because I think that's really what I think a lot of people like player props like even more now. You want to be able to bet superstars, partially there's a couple reasons why. One is that there's more liquidity available, I think, for each line for these superstars. They're not going to be as sensitive. Like a LeBron James prop is not going to be as sensitive as like a random like Aaron Wiggins or like a Kason Wallace or like an Alec Burks prop, or I'm trying to think of some random players here, like, or even like a Santi Aldama prop, right? Like those players are going to be much, much, much more volatile because they're just not getting as much action normally. The books aren't prepared to handle that kind of action. Whereas they know when they put out a LeBron prop, a Jokic prop, a Luka prop, whatever, they are expecting more action on those lines. It's not that those lines still can't get steamed, but just the limits on those props are going to be a little bit different for the threshold for the line to move. So for me, I think it's important to, number one, I think people like to bet on them. I think people like to bet on stars. Number two, those bets are usually more widely available. They're going to be on more books. They're going to be more consistent. They're going to be out for longer times. And I think that they just have more availability and people can play them more. So I think that's why it's important for me to give those out to you, because you can actually get down on them. And it's not just, like maybe you can only take what the book limit is, or so to speak, but you're going to have a little bit more opportunity to do so. Whereas, sometimes if you put out even like a role player like a Derek White, right? If we put out a Derek White prop, everybody, like a lot of people know who Derek White is, at least if you're betting NBA or if you're even following NBA, a lot of people know who Derek White is. But we put out a prop, it's going to get torched. Just because they're not expecting that type of handle on a Derek White prop. So I think it's important to kind of remember that. It's important for like to understand like how we're trying to balance it, or at least how I try to balance it for you guys to make sure that the service is good. And I think that that's critically important overall. And that kind of ties into some of the things that are going on with March basketball right now, right? So with March NBA, a lot of teams, really from now until the end of the regular season, a lot of teams are resting, especially right now. Like we saw, Curry set out last night. The Nuggets sat everybody the other day. The Lakers sit Luka. There's like a variety of different situations where players are sitting. And it makes it very difficult to bet NBA. But I also think that there is some opportunity here. There is some opportunity to be prepared where if, you look at the schedule and you go, all right, well, like this is the front end of a back-to-back, or this is the back end of a back-to-back. This is the third game in 4 days, fifth and 7. Those are some opportunities where you can look at the schedule and you can say, okay, well, there might be a rest opportunity somewhere in here. And sometimes you can't like always get ahead of it. You can't always bet it beforehand, or like sometimes there'll be opportunities where the props are all listed, right, but you're not sure of like who's gonna sit, who's gonna play, whatever. Like the other day when Jokic sat against the Warriors and Westbrook wound up going off for a triple-double, it was funny because the day before on Sunday night when we were recording buckets for Monday, I was talking about how I wanted Russell Westbrook over 21.5 PRA. That line literally never populated anywhere besides underdog and sleeper, two places that I can't bet. A lot of people can't bet. And the only time it popped was basically right before the tip when everybody was ruled out. There was no real edge to be had there. Granted, he's obviously had the triple double, but the line was, I think it closed at like 34.5 PRA. Just not even in the ballpark of where I wanted it based on what I was fetching from the night before. So sometimes you can try to get ahead of it where you could say, and I talked about it on buckets, I was like, I like this line regardless. I think it's a good bet regardless of who's in or out. I think that he could go over this line if everybody's in. But the fact that there's a lot of upside on this player if players are out is, I think, something you can also do. It's something you can also take advantage of. So I'll talk about it in a bit, but the Cavs play the Kings late, or I guess we could start off talking about the slate this way. So the Cavs play the Kings. The Cavs just lost their second game in a row now. They lost to the Magic the other day, and now they lost to the Clippers. Now they're on their third game in 4 days or 5 days, whatever it is. No, third game in 4 days because they played Sunday, were off Monday, played Tuesday. Now they're playing Wednesday. Third game in 4 days. Evan Mobley was on the injury report for Tuesday night against the Clippers. He wound up playing. Now, would it shock you if Evan Mobley didn't play on Wednesday? I think that we're at the point in the season too where the Cavs are so entrenched really in the number one seed in the East that they're probably going to stay there. They're not going to drop out of it. They're maybe jockeying with Oklahoma City for overall number one seed, overall best record in the NBA. But how much do you think that matters? That's something that the Cavs probably have to weigh to a degree too. And especially when you can couple it with saying, well, we need to get through the East. We got to be rested. We've never made it to the finals with this group of players. Like we need to be rested. We need to be healthy, what have you. Now, if they open up props for this game against the Kings, where we know Domantas Sabonis is out for the next 10 days, right? Due to the ankle sprain, and the Kings are 3-6 without him. It's a back-to-back for Cleveland. There's a number of players that could sit. Like I said, maybe Evan Mobley. If they open up props for Jared Allen, for example, now might be a great time to hop in on him before the Cavs are obligated to update their injury report for later in the day. I think their update is due around like 2 or 3 p.m. tomorrow or Wednesday, right? And if they're opening up props for the Cavs, which they might, because they a lot of times they open up player props for the main starters, or so to speak, it could be a great opportunity to maybe jump on like a Jared Allen rebounds bet, because you know that Sabonis isn't playing and you know that Evan Mobley was on the report yesterday. Maybe they use it as an opportunity to give him some rest the day after, third game in 4 days. So just something you can kind of keep an eye out on. It's hard to go through every single angle like that on the show, but that's just something that, a tool that you guys have that you can kind of look at and say like, yeah, like, this is a good spot. This guy might sit, or, we can kind of guess here. So it's almost like a double-sided bet in a way. It's almost like a parlay, like you're betting on somebody to sit, but then when you make that bet, there's inherently extra value in the bet that you made. So I think that you have to look at it where you like the prop no matter what, but if somebody does play or doesn't play, it can dramatically swing it. So if somebody doesn't play, it makes it a much better bet. I think that you can also go the other way, and you need to be cognizant of it too, because people will say like that line seems a little high, or like that line seems a little fishy. And a lot of times it'll be almost indicated to you in the spread of the game whether or not there's like a real question of somebody sitting, because you could look at a spot and go, like, I don't know, like that game probably shouldn't be -5. Like the other day with Denver and Golden State, the Warriors were like 5.5 point favorites. And you look at that and you go, all right, yeah, like I get it. Golden State's been good and they're at home, but like 6 point favorites right now to the Nuggets. And you looked at that and you go, somebody's probably going to sit. And that's kind of what wound up happening. Granted, it jumped all the way to 10 after. So like there was still some line value, because I think it was kind of, it was indeterminate of who was going to sit, and not only who was going to sit, but how many of the questionable players were going to sit. So definitely something to keep in mind. Definitely some tools in your chest to kind of look out for, and figure out how you're going to attack some of these opportunities. All right, let's get into the slate a little bit now. Besides that game, the Knicks take on the Spurs, and then I have another thing I want to talk about right at the end. The Knicks take on the Spurs, and the Spurs are 8.5 point home dogs. Mitchell Robinson's questionable. No De'Aaron Fox, obviously. No Victor Wembanyama. Cat should really cook in this game. His points props at 25.5. I'm a little concerned about a blowout, to be honest with you, but I couldn't talk you off of an over. The biggest thing is I would almost love if Mitch was out for this spot. Looking at the Knicks schedule, they've got the Spurs today, and then they have the Hornets tomorrow. So this is another spot where you say like, all right, well, Mitchell Robinson's questionable. Maybe he doesn't go. If he doesn't go, who sees the biggest bump? And it's probably going to be Cat in the rebounding department. So I think for this game, going against the Spurs team without Wemby, it might be a decent spot where you could say like, all right, well, like I kind of want to grab Cat PR. He should be able to go off in terms of his scoring. The rebound should also be there as well. So I'm going to keep an eye out for those lines. Keep an eye out for some of those props. But Cat and OG both had some really odd stat lines on against Miami in terms of the rebound chances. Cat only had 8 chances. OG Anunoby only had 7. Josh Hart had 19, and Mitch Robinson had 15. So that, I think, the Cat with Robinson type of scenario, especially if Mitchell Robinson's minutes continue to climb, he played almost 24 minutes against Miami. That could be something where Cat starts to see a little bit of a regression in his rebounding opportunities. So 100% something you got to keep an eye out for. I also do like a little bit of OG Anunoby in this spot. He took a ton of shots against Miami. He just couldn't get anything to go. A lot of open looks, a lot of really strong opportunities there. So definitely looking for some OG Anunoby props. I probably would want to create, I hate calling them builders, but I might like to create like a little bit of an SGP here with the idea that the Knicks probably can get this done, take care of business against the Spurs, maybe get a blowout type of win. But they obviously need some players to score. They obviously need some players to put up some numbers. So if you knock them down a little bit, then they have a better opportunity to do so in kind of in 3 quarters. Looking at the Mavericks versus the Pacers, Pacers are 9-point home favorites. The Mavs, just everybody's dead. Halliburton's questionable. Siakam is questionable with a personal reason. So those ones are always interesting. I wonder to a degree, if Siakam's able to go, does then Halliburton sit? Are they intertwined at all in terms of what the expected situation is? Because the Pacers play the Nets tomorrow, so it's another set where you have this back-to-back type of scenario. And you could probably play Halliburton today, let Siakam deal with the personal stuff, and then flip-flop them. And then Siakam maybe can come back for the Thursday game, give Halliburton that day off to kind of rest up a little bit. So that could definitely be something they do, so they could win both games or try to win both games against the Mavericks and the Brooklyn Nets. Halliburton over 9.5 assists and double-double, I think I really like. I probably would consider a points plus assist spot if Siakam is out. I think that this, after talking through it here, it does make a little bit of sense to maybe try to do it that way, given I don't know what the personal reason is. It's just listed as a personal reason. So there might be a little bit of additional upside if Siakam sits. Alternatively, it's possible that they just go with Siakam. Maybe Siakam's good in this game, and then they want to flip-flop it and give Halliburton off and then have Halliburton play against Brooklyn. So a couple things to consider, a couple things to keep an eye out for. The Rockets are taking on the Orlando Magic. on Wednesday. And the spot that I'm looking at for that game is I think that both of these teams are a little bit overrated. I think that the Magic are obviously coming off a pretty big win against the Cleveland Cavaliers over the weekend, and the Rockets have slowly just kept climbing right back up the standings. But I do think that not having Amen Thompson is fairly significant in this spot. He's somebody that I think could shut down a Franz Wagner, could shut down a Paolo Banchero. And without him, it does make the Rockets just a touch more susceptible to some of that offense from Orlando, even though they don't have a lot of that offense. I would probably lean towards an under in this game. I think that given some of the lack of offensive firepower that Orlando has, and then the fact, obviously, you still have Tari Eason is still there for the Rockets to kind of be deployed on either Paolo or Franz. So I think that there's plenty of opportunity for Houston kind of slow them down, especially as they've had one of the better defensive squads in the NBA this season. Next, we're looking at the Pistons versus the Heat. Heat are 5.5-point home dogs. They are going to be obviously without Jovic. Andrew Wiggins is questionable. Alec Burks is questionable. I was looking at Asar over 4.5 rebounds. I think that might be a little bit of an angle here. He's been getting enough minutes. I do think this game also has some blowout opportunity here. The one thing about Miami is they have been abysmal in the fourth quarter. It's gotten talked about a little bit more recently. Something that was kind of, I don't want to call it under wraps, but it was something that was kept a little bit closer. If this is a close game going in the fourth quarter, just take Detroit. They're going to win this game, and you are not even going to have to worry about it because Miami has been that bad in the fourth quarter. Pretty important game for Detroit. Maybe they can climb out of the 6. Maybe they can move up to the 5, and that would be pretty significant for them in the playoff picture. Looking at the Pelicans versus the Timberwolves, Timberwolves are 12.5-point home favorites. Trey Murphy is out, tore his labrum. Rudy Gobert, I think, should smack in this game. If we look at what New Orleans has down on the interior, not particularly strong. Yves Missi has gotten rolled over in a couple spots. Remember when Yves Missi was being talked about for Rookie of the Year? Yeah, those days feel very, very distant at this point in time. So I do think that Rudy Gobert should have a great game. I like him over 9.5 rebounds here. Not sure if it's going to be official play. I am a little bit concerned about a blowout, but I do think that Gobert should have an excellent game here against the New Orleans Pelicans. Next, we have the 76ers versus the Thunder. Thunder are 10-point favorites. Everybody's dead for Philadelphia, except that Quentin Grimes almost dropped 50 the other day, 50 at 8 threes. The craziest part about the Quentin Grimes trade, there's a couple things going on. Number one is that he's actually playing so well that he might win enough games for Philly to get them out of that 6th seed, and with the 6th best odds for like a top 6 pick. If they don't get that, they don't keep that pick. So all this year, everything, all the money, it'd just be totally wasted. And then when you look at it too, Dallas could really use a player like Quentin Grimes, and they just don't even have him now. So really tough scenario. For Oklahoma City, the only reason this spread is -10, there's no SGA, no Dort, no J-Dub. Hartenstein is questionable. Kason Wallace is also questionable. You have to look at, obviously, Chet. Chet should score pretty easily. He should score pretty well here. Philadelphia is severely undersized. I also think that you probably have to take a gander at Aaron Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins should have a decent opportunity in this spot, whether it's scoring, whether it is getting to the rack, getting some dimes out there. And Isaiah Joe should also be able to get some threes up. He obviously has that little bit of history with Philadelphia, might be comfortable playing against them. So I do think that maybe a little bit of Isaiah Joe could be fun as well. The next game, I wish we just literally could bet on somebody just not winning the game. Like if both teams could lose, that would be the bet. We got the Wizards versus the Jazz. Jazz are somehow favored, 4.5-point favorites. I just don't, like, nobody's playing. There's no Sadiq Bey, no Malcolm Brogdon, no Bilal, no Middleton, no Smart, Poole's doubtful, no Collins, no Walker Kessler. Like, the list goes on. This game is disgusting. And the thing that's like kind of fucked up, honestly, is that the Jazz get fined for tanking, basically, for the player participation policy. And then they just immediately upgrade Lauri Markkanen the next day, start him, like plays, and then his minutes are just capped. So I don't think you can bet reliably on really like anybody in these games. I don't know what the minutes are going to look like. Washington and Utah have both been able to kind of play their guys decent minutes because they're trying to like just go to the bottom, and they're going to the bottom either way. The problem is this game is kind of like it's almost like extra high leverage here, because if we look at the standings, the Wizards are 15 and 52. The Jazz are 15 and 54. This is a critically important game for the loss column here for both of these teams, because it's one of those spots where the win winds up being against the other team. So it's like a tie-breaking win, and it's a disaster. Both of these teams want to lose, and both of these teams otherwise have the worst record in the NBA. They have the worst record in their respective conferences, and a loss here could help cement them having the best odds in the NBA draft for the number 1 pick. So just a disgusting game. I really, really would not recommend betting on this spot. Then we have the Grizzlies versus the Blazers. Blazers 4.5-point home dogs. John Morant's out. Santi Aldama is questionable. Andre Ayton's out. Jeremy Grant's doubtful. Robert Williams is out. NRA has been pretty good, but I think that the spot here is Donovan Clingan. I think that he finally gets some burn with DeAndre Ayton and Robert Williams both out, and Jeremy Grant doubtful helps a little bit as well. I like over 10.5 rebounds, plus 105. He's played at least 20 minutes in 9 of 10 games, and in the last 4, 31, 34, 30, 25 minutes. I just think this is a great opportunity against this Grizzlies team who has kind of played Zach Edey a little bit longer in some of these spots against teams that are, a little bit lower in the standings. They feel like they can trust him out there. And I think this is a great opportunity for Clingan against, like a relatively slower footed player like Zach Edey, but also somebody that's going to keep him in the paint. He's going to be tied to the paint because Edey doesn't really have game anywhere else on the floor. So I think it's a great opportunity for over 10.5 rebounds for Donovan Clingan. Next, I'm looking at the Chicago Bulls versus the Phoenix Suns. Suns are 6.5-point home favorites. No Lonzo, no Ayo Dosunmu. Josh Giddey is questionable. No Grayson Allen, no Bradley Beal, no Mason Plumlee. So for me, I'm grabbing Vucevic double-double in this spot. We're going to see a lot of Vuce versus Nick Richards, and you can get that at plus 135 at Bet365. You can also build it out. Be sure to try that. At the time that I'm recording this, the next best I'm seeing is plus 114 on Caesars. I just really, really like the spot against Nick Richards and the Suns. Bulls, they're kind of holding on to the 10 seed or the 9 seed right now, actually, in the Eastern Conference. They have a little bit of an opportunity to move up to 8 if they can kind of catch Orlando here, if Orlando's sleeping a little bit. But they actually are tied, but I think they're past Miami due to tiebreaker for the 9-10 spot in the Eastern Conference. But Vooch is averaging 10.1 rebounds per game. His rebounds prop is set at 9.5, and that's like minus 110. There's really just no reason that these two odds shouldn't be the same, in my opinion. There's only been one game this season where he got 10 rebounds and did not secure a double-double. So to give me essentially an extra like 45, 50 cents, I'm going to take that every time and give me the plus 135 on the double-double. If your odds happen to be the same and you can't build this out in a way where you're getting better price on double-double, don't bet double-double. Bet over 9.5 rebounds. Like, it doesn't make sense to add the variance if you don't have to. But for me, the analysis is it's just too good of a spot. It's too good of an opportunity and too much extra value to be gained by adding in that one extra variable here. Also, I do like Tyus Jones over 5.5 assists, like plus 105 as well on DraftKings. Part of the thought process here is he's playing some minutes with Devin Booker, but last game, without Bradley Beal, only 4 dimes, still played a decent amount of minutes. The issue for me at first was, he came off the bench. Wasn't really a huge deal. Still played 27 minutes, still had plenty of opportunity here. The big thing is that he's not playing as many minutes with Devin Booker. He still is playing some minutes with Devin Booker, though, which I think is a good thing. The key is that he's playing no minutes, obviously, with Bradley Beal. He sees one of the biggest jumps when he's playing without Beal on the Phoenix Suns. He goes from 7.4 assists per 100 to essentially 11.4 assists per 100 without Bradley Beal. So pretty significant jump, basically a 4 assist jump. It's almost a 50% jump for him playing with and without Beal. For Booker, he actually sees a little bit of a downturn in his assists when he's playing without Devin Booker. I think in part probably because he's getting a couple more shots up, But I do think that the way that it's staggered, he should be able to run the bench unit, which I think is important. And that's one of the things that I think is going to be critical for him. I think he's going to be able to get his shots if he wants, but I think he's also going to be able to run the bench unit here. And I'm not super concerned about, like Colin Gillespie starting. He only played 16 minutes compared to Tyus Jones playing 27 minutes in their last matchup out there. So I do think that Tyus Jones is going to get a decent amount of run. Over 5.5 assists is a great spot here for him against the Chicago Bulls in what does amount to be a pace-up game for the Phoenix Suns. Next, I'm looking at the Nuggets versus the Lakers. I think this is probably going to be the game that most people want to watch on the slate. The Lakers are 1-point home favorites. This line has moved from -1.5. We're seeing -1 now. I think this is entirely possible we close at a pick 'em. The key here is that obviously a lot of the Nuggets are well rested. They've listed a lot of players on the report. Christian Brown is questionable, Jokic is questionable, Murray is questionable, and Aaron Gordon is probable. I do think that most of these players are going to play in this spot. The one thing that's interesting is Michael Porter Jr. rarely rests. So he's always somebody that's a little bit of a safer bet in some of these spots where you think players may or may not sit for Denver. And his over 24.5 PR had been a wagon versus the Lakers, but not the last 2 times out. I think a lot of that has to do with some changes in the Lakers personnel. I don't know if I would go back to it, but it is something, if you looked at a hit rate chart, you go, wow, that's a great bet. That's definitely going to hit. We can buy a little bit low here. I'm not entirely convinced right now, even without Rui Hachimura and LeBron James. Luka Doncic is listed as probable for this spot. I like over 8.5 rebounds for him. He's hitting 4 straight without LeBron, and he's over in 8 of his last 9 versus Denver. I think that this is a great opportunity for him. It's a spot where they're going to need him to size up a little bit. Luka is obviously a pretty big guy, but they're going to need him to size up a little bit against this Nuggets team that definitely, kind of outsizes them. They're just significantly bigger team than the Los Angeles Lakers, and I think you're going to need a little bit more from Luka Doncic in this game. It's going to be a great game. I don't really have a feeling on the side, but I think I would lean towards Denver to a degree. I know that the Lakers played them tough the other day without Luka, but I do think this is a spot where Denver wants to, they have to say, let's go get this win. We're rested, and I think that you have to give them a little bit of an edge because of that. So that's kind of the recap of the NBA slate for the best bets for the Wednesday slate. And I did want to touch on something else. I was listening to Circles Off, and one of the comments was it was about Ariel Epstein, and she shout out AJ, but it was about Ariel Epstein, and she had a tweet about how it's like us versus the books, and we should always want basically everybody should want to beat the books, we're all on the same side. And Circles Off had some dialogue about it, and it when I heard it, I never really thought about it this way, but it's definitely true. And I kind of wanted to talk about it because essentially you have to think about this as it really isn't us versus the books in a way, because if we always win, if everybody always wins, then the book is gonna go away, and you don't want that either, because who are you beating, right? You also, or not necessarily the book's going to go away. That's probably the real extreme. But if everybody becomes really good at betting a particular market, they're going to change the odds. They're going to change what the exposure is. They're going to change what their payouts are, because they're like, wow, we are really mispricing this. We're going to start paying a lot more attention to this. So it's kind of like if you start bringing attention to a particular sport, a particular angle, particular prop, a lot of times those dry up then, because they go, oh man, we got hammered on that market. We can't do that. And it's kind of one of those things where I've thought about this with some of the more niche markets. Right? I bet a free throw, or I gave out a free throw market a week ago, 2 weeks ago, on Jimmy Butler, and it hit. But part of the problem was the book they really didn't take a lot of action. It's not available in a lot of places. Then they, at one point earlier in the season, they had 3 points attempted, free throws attempted, field goals attempted, and a lot of those don't exist anymore. And I think it's because they had a lot of trouble pricing those. So it's one of those things where if you put it out there and everybody's crushing the angle, then it's just going to go away. You're not going to keep it. So if it is something that's out there and there are people that like aren't very good at it and they're putting out some nonsense, right? It is an opportunity for us to take advantage. And one of the things that I think, like, I really don't do a lot of parlays, but I do think that because there are people that focus almost like entirely on parlays and they just throw out like some bullshit every time, they're just like, we're just gonna throw this stuff together, put it in a blender, and I'm gonna send it to my people. And whatever, do you. However, the good news is that that has now given us a better opportunity because we are getting more things that we can bet on. There's a greater availability of player props. There are more alts because people love to bet alts. There is just a little bit more opportunity there, right? So I don't always put it on ladders. I don't do a ton of that. I don't do a ton of parlays. I do a decent amount of futures, especially earlier in the season. But every so often, I'll throw out a ladder, I'll throw out a bet, and in part, like you almost want to say thank you, right? Because you have the ability to do so because there are these other people that are putting together these plays that are kind of floating this thing where the sports books know it's super profitable to have these offerings available because they know they're making a ton of money because people are just putting like lottery tickets together. They're betting like only alts every night. They're throwing together random shit that just doesn't really make like there's no real analysis underneath of it, right? And on the flip side, now we get the opportunity to look at a game and go, man, like you know, there's like a bunch of players I could bet on to get a double double. There's a lot of players I could bet on to get 10, 12 rebounds, assists. There are some players I could bet on to get, 35, 40 points that maybe would not have been available had these other people or had this not become so popular to do. And it's not just that there's like the availability of the bet. And I mean this sincerely. It's not just because like you can bet on something doesn't mean that the line is good either. It doesn't mean that that the price is fair. You could look at something and go, well, this should be priced here, this should be priced here. Sometimes there is value when you go up the ladder because the way that you are giving it a percentage chance, the way that you're modeling it, the implied odds of the bet can be favorable to you. The other thing is when you have all these alts and a lot of times they're available so early, sometimes it doesn't it's not totally aligned with what the rest of the book is offering. So we've seen it plenty of times where if you bet, say, like over 2.5 threes, it could be minus 140. But if you go to 3+ threes, it's minus 115. And you can take advantage of that. You can take advantage of some of those discrepancies. And those probably wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the fact that people literally won't bet over 2.5, or they will bet over 2.5, but they want to see like 3+, 4+, 5+. So the books are offering these bets, these markets, and because there's so many of them, it's obviously harder for them to totally key in on everything, to totally key on every little nuance, right? And there are some opportunities for us to take advantage of. So I think that it's kind of one of those things like, look, everybody can win. I think you want what's best. You want people to win. You want what's best for people. I don't think that anybody ever goes like, well, like I want this guy to lose. Like nobody's like that, or at least I don't feel that way, right? But on the flip side is if everybody's winning, it probably means that like we're drying up an edge, we're drying up an angle that you can take advantage of. And to me, like that's a little bit more important. So I would much rather prefer, like I don't need everybody to go win, especially on the markets that I'm playing. And you go win somewhere else, but not on mine. And I think that it's kind of one of those things where it's like you can't peel back every layer of every onion for people, because if you do, the edges dry up and people start taking or using some of the things that you're doing, and it gives it more exposure. It's not necessarily always going to be used right? It's not going to necessarily always be used the way that you would have used that piece of information or that market, whatever, that edge, but it is popping enough for the books and like their line makers to maybe look at it and go, like we need to give this market a little bit more attention. We're getting a little bit heavier action on this now. We need to be a little bit sharper here. So it's always like a little bit of a give and take, especially in the content game where, we're trying to give out meaningful information, meaningful edges, but at the same time, it's like you need to be able to keep some of the sauce in like the secret recipe, or so to speak. And that was just my thought on that. I thought it was really an interesting take because, like, obviously, I think a lot of people want to see and like see other people do well. I also think that it's important to understand that it's a situation where, yeah, like the books obviously they have a hold, they have a little bit of an advantage, like in terms of the fact they're setting the lines, but it really isn't 100% us like versus the books, because if the books don't win sometimes, at least in terms of like say individual bets, like whatever, I think that some of the marketing, some of the overarching legislation probably needs to change to a degree. But that's a different conversation. But I think that from like an individual betting perspective, there are going to be times where like not everybody not everybody is going to win, and not everybody even should win. And I think that that's critically important to kind of understand and kind of remember, right? And it was just something that was kind of turning in my brain, and I want to get it out there for you guys. So let me know what you guys think. Let me hear it in the comments. Be sure again to like, subscribe to the podcast. Really helps me out, helps my partners out, and it really just is it just helps me get better content to you, lets me know that you're appreciating and liking what we're putting out there. So for pods and recs, I'm going to recommend, so this was something, right? My dog ripped up my carpet in my living room, and my last 2 days have been very busy. It wasn't fun. It's not fun to have your carpet just be like fucked up. And the good news was there was a floor underneath of it that I was like, why did they put carpet on this? Like when we bought this house, like why did they put carpet on this? So we tore up the carpet, and then naturally like nothing else. Like there were a bunch of other things like in terms of the aesthetic of the room, or so to speak. So had to go through that, changed it. So I'm going to recommend though, if you have garbage, literally like go to your local dump. I packed my Jeep full of shit, and I went to the dump. It was $10. It was awesome. I got rid of all this stuff, and I was like, "This is amazing. Why would I ever do anything else?" It was great. It was like a nice little ride. It was like 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back. Listen to a podcast. It was great. It took me 3 seconds. $10. It was awesome. So recommend going to the dump. Then I bought a nail gun. That thing is awesome. Like, what an experience. What a great tool. So really just thrilled with that purchase. I bought it and I was like, maybe I'll use it and return it if I don't like it, whatever. That shit's not getting returned. So I don't know what project you need to do to buy a nail gun, but buy a nail gun. It was awesome. I love it. Thrilled to have this nail gun. I will say though, I never owned a Ryobi tool, or at least not one that I bought. I mostly own DeWalt and Craftsman tools, right? But I was watching this video and they were like, this Ryobi nail gun is awesome. It's like $150, and it this is kind of getting in the weeds, but for people that don't know, most of these nail guns have a lot of them, like the big industrial ones, have like a fucking pneumatic thing into it, and they have to be connected to like an air compressor. So this one doesn't, which is great. It's cordless, and it was fantastic. It was light. I was like, this is the best thing ever. So I would recommend, like, if you are going to get one, don't get one that needs the air compressor. Just get one that's all in the one thing. I don't know which other ones do, but I bought this Ryobi one. I don't remember the model number, but if you want to know it, DM me, leave a comment, whatever. I will get back to you. So really couldn't recommend it more. And the only other thing that I couldn't recommend more is using Rhythm to create your NCAA March Madness bracket. Just make your life easier. It's just one less decision that you have to make. It's honestly, actually, no. You get to make one decision. The decision is to use Rhythm to make your bracket, and it's actually going to take out all of the other decisions that you need to make for the bracket. So it's like, that's a great trade. That's a plus EV scenario where you're making one choice to use Rhythm instead of having to make however many selections there are in your NCAA bracket. So highly recommend it. Be sure to like it and get a free subscription, free trial right down in the bio. And it's going to help you for March Madness, and it's going to help you continue to cash that.